It's time for week 10 of Sabbath School Boot Camp. You're in boot camp to learn how to think creatively and critically about your Sabbath School lesson. So let's grab that little booklet and get on with it. This lesson's author, Mark Finley, wants us to talk about small groups this week. In case you don't speak churchese, small groups refers to, small groups of Christians that gather to study or pray or just hang out together. They go by a lot of different names in a lot of different churches. They could be grow groups or life groups or cell groups or whatever. And the philosophy behind small groups is that a small team of motivated people who are on the same page about something can accomplish more than waiting for an entire congregation to get on board with an idea. From a missional perspective, often the idea is that each group is like a micro church. When it gets too large, it might split, form a new group, and voila. Anyway, believe me when I say there's like 1 million books on the subject of small groups. And if you've gone to church for over 10 years, chances are your church has talked about starting some small groups. And if you've gone to church even longer than that, chances are your church has started some small groups and they've fizzled out because small groups are hard to keep going. Sliding over to Sunday, Finley wants us to see that the foundation for a small group is what he calls the Godhead. Godhead is an older word used when people don't like using the T word, because they know if they do, the anti-Trinitarian Adventists will lose their cool in Sabbath school and burn your class to the ground. So I'll just go ahead and say what Finley wishes he could say. Trinity, 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 deal with it. I don't care. So the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are the original small group. They were there at creation and at the moment of our redemption. We talk about God in the singular, ruling over creation as he wills. And yet, as Finley points out, when it comes time for the really big decisions in our history, it's not a solo show. It's God in counsel with himself, God deliberating with himself, God cooperating with himself. And this is a shot across the bow of our radical individualism. Well, that's all fine, but does anyone else think that Finley's laying it on really thick? Like, do we need a deep theological foundation for doing small groups? Is anyone out there saying that small groups of believers cannot gather together to read or study or pray unless we find a biblical reason? I mean, it feels a little bit like having a Bible study on board meetings. Is this really something we need to justify? What exactly are we going to learn in the Bible about board meetings? Or in this case, what are we going to learn about small groups by studying creation? Now, moving over to Monday, we look at Exodus 18 and how Moses divided Israel into groups for the purpose of effective government. Jesus, too, called a small group of disciples. It's Jesus' example that I think we should focus on here, as I don't think Moses' organization of Israel has much to offer us. I mean, churches simply don't need to be broken down into groups of 12 or whatever in order to be organized effectively. Jesus, on the other hand, knew that you need a small group of followers if you want to start a revolution. He consciously rejected the masses of people who wanted to follow him, and he just focused on 12 people. Small groups for the purpose of revolution, for the purpose of change, for the purpose of revival is a worthy goal. I have pastored, belonged to a number of churches in my life. Many of them are missionally stuck, and they know they need to change, but they don't know the way forward, and no one wants to make the first step. So following Jesus' example, you might empower several small groups to find the way forward. Set one up to pray and another one just to do life together. See what happens. Churches are often a complex web of relationships. Too much change will upset some people, let's just say. But it's easy for 7 or so people to get together on a Thursday and worship however they want, to study however they want. They're free to experiment. Small groups can be a way of doing spiritual R&D in your church if your church seems stuck. Trotting over to Tuesday, we enter discussion about how small groups can be organized around spiritual giftedness. Taken from 1 Corinthians 12, the idea here is that small groups can be intentionally formed on the basis of member giftedness. Certainly some groups work this way, like life groups, which are a group of people organized around the common interests, like racquetball. Look, I want to pause this video here because I'm not really sure how to go on. I really struggled with this lesson because I think something is missing. The quarter's theme is on making friends for God, and this lesson hardly makes an effort to tie the topic of small groups to that larger theme. And what's more, as I said, I think Finley is more interested in giving us a Bible study on small groups rather than helping us with the more pressing problem of actually starting and sustaining small groups. What's even more, I feel it's anachronistic to throw around the term small group when talking about things in the Bible as diverse as Moses' organization of Israel to Lydia inviting Paul over to her house after she was baptized. It feels a little like we're trying to stick a triangle block into a round hole. It almost fits, but this word small groups doesn't quite fit in there. I think Finley could have gone in a few different directions here. He could have dealt with the practical side of small groups as an evangelistic tool. Start a small group, study a book on prayer, and invite your neighbors, right? This would have tied small groups in with that larger theme of making friends for God. Or Finley could have focused more on the idea of churches doing ministry in teams and how that's better than the prevalent individualistic way church members typically do ministry today. There's a lot we should be saying about this cult of Christian individualism in America. We need to learn how to work better together as Christians. If Finley went down this road, it's about making better friends for God out of your fellow church members, which I think is kind of vital. We often worship together, but we're not often friends in a way that survives sundown on Saturday, if you know what I mean. It's not that I disagree with any of the points or the text that Finley is raising here from the Bible. It's just, it feels like we're trying to draw something out of the text that isn't quite there. It feels like we're doing a Bible study on potluck by studying the feeding of the 5,000. I mean, I wouldn't force the word potluck on that story, nor would I expect to glean wonderful insights about potluck from that story. The story isn't designed to help us with that particular question. It's potluck. Just bring food and share. It would seem kind of silly to have a really deep Bible study on that, okay? Long story short, small groups are a good thing. There are plenty of examples of people in the Bible who banded together in small teams to accomplish amazing things by the grace of God. Stop trying to do ministry by yourself. Stop waiting for other people to do ministry for you, okay? You have a couch, start something. You really should consider forming an online group. It could be on Zoom, it could be in your home. You could choose a format and topic that your friends outside your church would want to join. That's it. That's all the time I got for this week. So class dismissed. We'll see you next week.